Breaks of rain at times. Much of eastern Scotland and to the east of the Pennines staying dry and bright. Plenty of sunshine, as I say, in the south, and we've lost the heat, so temperatures, although potentially getting into the high 20s across the southeast, mostly high teens, low 20s, so close to average for the time of year, and it will feel that much fresher than the past few days. However, the heat is expected to build again through this weekend, and the Met Office do have extreme heat warning in place, covering both Sunday and Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, you're watching Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner, flying solo today. If you like what we do, tell all your mates, won't you? We're on your TV, radio and online. I'm here until midday with the show that you created. Everything that we debate and dissect today was suggested by you. So, huge thank you for getting in touch. And don't go quiet on me now, will you? Keep your views coming on GBViews at gbnews.uk and Twitter at GBnews. But before all of that, and there is a lot to come, here's the latest news.
A very good morning to you. It's just 1 minute past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, 8 Conservative candidates face the first round of MPs' votes today to determine who will continue in the battle to become Prime Minister. Who are they? Well, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Tom Tugendhat, Kemi Badenoch, Penny Mordaunt, Jeremy Hunt, Nadhim Zahawi and Suella Braverman will all be on the ballot. 3 candidates, including the former Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, stepped out of the race after failing to secure enough support last night. The remaining candidates have to hit a threshold of 30 votes to stay in the race. The results will be announced at 5 p.m. The UK economy grew by 0.5% in May, following a 0.2% drop in April. Analysts had expected the figure to remain flat. The Office for National Statistics says the growth came after a bounce back across all services, manufacturing and construction, with a significant increase in demand for health services and holidays. Economics commentator Laurie Laird told GB News a recession isn't likely.
The way that healthcare is measured in GDP, this has become a big, big boost to GDP. It's a little bit worse when you look at things called consumer-facing services. That's if we go to hotels, if we go to restaurants, if we go to the shops. That did quite poorly. That contracted a lot. So there was one anomaly, which is our going to the GP more often, that kept us in the black this month around. But because May was so strong, it looks like we will probably not contract in the second quarter. So it means that this talk of recession is still some way off.
The president of Sri Lanka has fled to the Maldives hours before he was due to resign. A state of emergency has been declared and a curfew has been imposed in the aftermath of the premier's escape. Protests continue in the country with ongoing demonstration caused by anger over inflation and widespread fuel and medicine shortages. Twitter is suing Elon Musk for breaking a £37 billion deal to buy the social media platform. Twitter's asking a US court to order the Tesla owner to complete the merger at the agreed share price. Last week, Musk said he was terminating the deal because Twitter failed to provide information regarding how many fake accounts were on the platform. New CCTV footage has been released showing the events of the shooting that took place in an elementary school in Texas in May. The video shows police stopping to use hand sanitizer as 18-year-old gunman Salvador Ramos entered the school in Uvalde carrying a rifle. 19 children and 2 teachers were killed in the latest in a string of mass shootings across the US. 4 men have been arrested in a National Crime Agency operation targeting migrant smuggling to the UK. A man was arrested in Dagenham on suspicion of facilitation offences, as well as 3 further men in Ilford, Streatham and Leytonstone. The arrests are linked to 2 separate events in 2019, where a total of 32 migrants were found in the back of HGVs in the Netherlands and in France. An amber warning for extreme heat's been issued for this Sunday and next Monday. The Met Office are warning of potential exceptionally high temperatures that could impact both infrastructure and travel. They say adverse health effects leading to potentially serious illness or danger to life are also likely and not limited to those most vulnerable to extreme heat. British talent's been recognised ahead of the 74th Emmy Awards, with several Britons receiving nominations. Colin Firth, Jodie Comer, Lily James and Brian Cox were among a number of British actors nominated. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Bev for today's To The Point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner, on your TV, radio and online. It is our viewer show today because it's Wednesday. We're going to talk about the stories that you wanted to hear about. So here is what you decided was on today's menu. Tory MPs will cast their first votes in the leadership contest this afternoon to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. The 8 candidates that remain have to secure 30 votes in the first round to stay in the race. Farmers in the Netherlands are protesting against new legislation that aims to cut emissions in the agriculture sector. Are net zero regulations ruining the farming industry? We've got all of that coming up, much more across the programme. But first of all, we want to go down straight to Westminster. Tom Tugendhat is making a little speech down there, I think, in his bid to be leader.
Security always comes before spreadsheets. So this is one of those moments where we've really just got to be very, very careful as we fight this battle of ideas, that we make sure that what we're doing is we're reinforcing British strength, we're reinforcing British democracy, we're reinforcing our allies. And I know we can do it. And we've got some great ideas out there. There's some fantastic people championing them. I'm looking forward to having this battle, but we do need to make sure we're focused on what we're saying to the world, because you guys, you know it, people watch it, and not just here in the UK. Now, I'll be very happy to take questions.
What's the mean counter you've got in mind? It's the sort of phrase that gets used about Rishi Sunak.
Well, I'm not going to name any names, but it's absolutely up to you to look quite hard at where people are talking about various different things and just see where different people are putting their aim and putting their targets, as it were, for defence. So that's what I'm talking about.
Tom Tugendhat, just to follow up with Gary, you taking a pop shot today at Rishi Sunak?
I'm not taking a
runner.
No.
In a race that's already really divided.
No.
You're having a little dig at the
No, I'm not.
you most fear.
No, Beth, I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm explaining the consequences of the words that we use here in this race, that we use as a team, as a Conservative team, as we speak to each other, as we speak to our friends. That's what I'm doing.
So are you saying that other candidates are not committed to 2% or 2.5%?
Well, you'll have to ask. It's absolutely up to you to ask them. That's not for me to say. What is for me to say is just to warn generally that one of the things we've really got to be careful about when we're talking about defence is that we're actually not just talking to ourselves. Andy, people do actually watch your show outside the southeast. They do actually watch it in other places as well.
But Rishi Sunak yesterday was asked specifically about his commitment to defence spending. It does feel as if you are responding to his answer.
Well, Andy, other people have also expressed views on defence spending as well, so this isn't a specific one about anybody.
Tom, do you see Rishi Sunak as your main rival in this race?
I think there's many main rivals, and I think they're all challenging me.
He's accused his competitors of fantasy politics, fantasy economics, saying they're offering fairy tales on spending they can't keep. Is that what you're offering here? You're saying you spend more on defence,
No.
in reality we can't afford to.
No, what I'm making absolutely clear, as you know very well, is that we need to be very careful with the words we use to make sure that what we're actually doing is we are defending our interests overseas, even when we're campaigning for this great democracy.
What exactly is your criticism?
My criticism is only that we need to be very careful about how we express ourselves and how we make sure that we reinforce our allies and reinforce our position around the world.
Tom Tugendhat, I just want to ask one other thing.
Last one.
It seems in this race that actually the three front runners emerging are Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, and
There you go.
I've forgotten the last word. And Penny Mordaunt, right? And Penny Mordaunt is positioning herself as a conviction Brexiteer, but a one-nation Conservative. Now, we know that you are the main candidate at the moment for the one-nation Conservatives. But if you don't get through to the final three, and I have to say to you, it looks unlikely.
I don't think so.
Bear with me, we can agree to disagree. If you don't get through, who would you prefer to have in that final two? Presumably you would back Penny Mordaunt because she also is a one-nation Conservative.
I think what you've got to look at is you've got to look at who's supporting who at this stage. You say, you use your description, I'll
So
use mine.
we can kind of hear Tom's answers. We're not sure of all the questions because obviously the reporters there are not mic'd up. But I've got Tom Harwood with me and we're going to come to Tom in just a moment to see what we thought of that. I thought he seemed a bit bossy. The viewers have been writing into us. You all have. And Audrey said, I wish that Jacob Rees-Mogg had thrown his hat into the ring for leadership. He's a reliable and trustworthy candidate. Well, Rees-Mogg did not. And in fact, he's backed Liz Truss to be the next leader. Conservative MPs will cast their votes in this contest this afternoon. As I said earlier, the 8 candidates that remain have to secure 30 votes to stay in the race. And a little reminder of who those candidates are. So here we go. Further votes will take place over the next few days to whittle them down to 2. So, as I say, Tom Harwood is with me now. Hello, Tom. First of all, do you ever sleep anymore?
Very little, I think. Until the 5th of September, when these results are finally announced. It's going to be a summer of little sleep.
Well, you're doing a brilliant job for us. What did you think of Tom Tugendhat then? I thought he seemed a little bit sort of shirty with the journalists.
It's interesting because Tom Tugendhat has never been in the cabinet. He's not even a minister. He's the chairman of a Commons committee, a very important committee, the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. But he's only been in the Commons since 2015, and he's already making himself out to be a relatively serious contender, 4th place amongst public backers amongst MPs.
Yeah.
But really, he's making his big pitch there on the Green about defence spending, about his background. He achieved the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the British Army. He's someone who has a very, very strong military background, and that is really what he's leaning on in his pitch. Now, how much wider can his pitch go? That's the big question, because many people suspect that Tom Tugendhat has a ceiling in this race, that the people who are backing him might be enough to get him through last round, may well be enough to get him through today, that 30 threshold, but will he stay to the bitter end? It seems like he may be in the second tier of candidates rather than the very top tier. So putting himself out there today on the Green might be more about asserting himself, maybe even pitching for a job.
Yeah.
Maybe even Defence Secretary.
Got his eye on defence. You might have to fight Ben Wallace for that one, though.
Certainly might. But in terms of these other candidates, what we might well see over the course of today, certainly by the end of today, is some candidates folding into others. I don't think Tom Tugendhat's near that position yet, but it's interesting to speculate.
And French wife and very pro-Remain, that will alienate those members of the Conservative Party who were very pro-Brexit.
It certainly will. Tom Tugendhat is seen as being on the left of the party, really. He's in the sort of One Nation caucus, voted Remain, French mother.
It's his mother who's French. And his wife, or just his mother? Don't know.
Do you know what? I don't know about the wife, but I know about the mother, although he's made some quite humorous remarks with regards to that. You know, I wish I could have chosen my parents better, etc. But interestingly, he's sort of representing that caucus of the party, which is important in these sort of races. But it might be tougher to get past the membership.
Well, let's have a look at who else we've got on there. I might see if we can bring up that graphic again, if we can, with the faces of all of the remaining candidates at the moment, the 8 of them. You know who's had a bit of a bounce, Tom, is Kenny Badenoch. 2 days ago, she was 33 to 1. She's now 15 to 1. She's got some very interesting people coming out and backing her. Daily Telegraph have written a very positive piece about Kemi. The Times did at the weekend. She's got Seb Coe's come out on side and said he supports her. Michael Gove, I think, as well, right? And a lot of the feeling about Kemi Badenoch is that she is a risk worth taking because Labour will find it very, very difficult to criticise or bring her down in an election.
Yes, it's so interesting. She's such a fresh face in this competition, but also she's a highly intelligent individual.
Yeah.
And I noticed listening to her leadership launch yesterday, she was a bit nervous when it came to the main speech. Her pitch wasn't potentially the most polished, but when it came to the questions and answers at the end, she was the most compelling at that point. When she was thinking on her feet and responding there, that showed a very key intellect. Now, I don't think she's completely in the top tier of candidates, those 3 that are really vying it out at this stage.
Which is going to be Sunak,
Rishi Sunak,
Truss.
Liz Truss and Penny Mordaunt. They're the 3 who have the most backers at this stage. But I think in terms of the wild cards, Kemi is definitely up there, perhaps right behind there in terms of those declared backers. Although, interestingly, only 4 candidates yesterday had 20 or more public backers. 8 got through with 20 nominations, but that was with people who weren't publicly backing those campaigns.
Now, Liz Truss, it's going to be a big day. It was a big day for all of them, but particularly for her. ERG chairman Mark Francois has come out. He'd said to Christopher Chope, and Christopher Chope has put this on Twitter, to say that the ERG group are having a meeting today at midday. There's 60 MPs in that group. Mark Francois has said he backs Liz Truss. If he can get that 60 ERG group to back Liz Truss, she's a shoo-in.
Oh, certainly. But, and here's the big but, the ERG, a research group more than a caucus. It's very hard to herd such a group of independent-minded individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many, many reasons why they joined the ERG in the first place, is because they're pretty independent-minded and unwilling to be whipped by the government and much more steadfast on issues like Brexit.
Interesting.
But crucially, I think the interesting point here is Liz's cabinet endorsements yesterday. Jacob Rees-Mogg, Nadine Dorries, her campaign's being chaired by Therese Coffey, the DWP secretary. These big beasts backing Liz do put her at an advantage because she's got that heft, that weight behind her. And crucially, those Brexiteer endorsements really matter because even though Liz Truss herself voted Remain, she has become one of the biggest cheerleaders for Brexit after that, achieving all those trade deals and backing the Jacob Rees-Mogg plan for regulatory reform, that big economic advantage of Brexit, doing things differently from the European regulatory model. That is a very interesting thing that the Brexiteers seem to think she's their candidate to deliver the regulatory divergence from the EU.
Quiet. OK, thank you, Tom. You're so good. Right, now, to further analyse this, I think you're going to be probably popping back, aren't you, between now and midday. Further analyse this, another political commentator, Stephen Carlton Woods, is joining us now. Good morning, Stephen. I don't know how much of that conversation you heard with Tom, but first of all, your thoughts, just generally.
Well, I think the party's got an uphill battle now.
Stephen, can we just do that again without a massive sigh? Stephen, don't look like you're sick of this already. So we're all feeling a little like that, but this is the exciting bit, Stephen. So come on, take another big breath and what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think that the party's damaged and it's got a long way to go to repair this damage. And we've seen people that have stuck the knife into Boris and they've all scattered and they've gone in the different ways and backed all these different candidates. And I think the membership is going to take a long time to forgive some people. So we've got all them issues in the party as well. But when we look at the race and the people going forward, there's a few interesting ones. And the interesting one for me is Kemi Badenoch, who to me is the most Tory out of all the candidates, saying the most Tory things. You've got Rishi Sunak, where there's a lot of people going to be against him, and I know there's a lot of discourse within the membership saying definitely not Rishi, so I don't know how that's going to pan out. But my worry is within this race is that people are going to split the vote amongst themselves. You've got Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss, that could take votes off one another. And then you could see people from the outside come in. Now, one of the biggest dangers is Jeremy Hunt, as far as I'm concerned, if he comes through, because people are splitting the vote with Penny Mordaunt and Liz Truss. That's a concern. I don't think Tom Tugendhat is really the right person to lead the party. And I think he's very confident of getting through this first stage. We have to wait and see. They need to get 30 backers ready for tomorrow, and we'll know that at 5 o'clock today. But I just think it's a very tough time for the Conservative Party. And for me personally, I think it's between Penny Mordaunt and Kemi Badenoch. But I think where do the party go if you're left with Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak? That could be the most damaging thing for the party.
And when you say damaging for the party, do you mean because come the next general election, neither of them, Jeremy Hunt or Rishi Sunak, would be terribly popular with the public?
Well, and the membership, the party membership. Don't forget, the party membership have voted for Boris. And the country voted for Boris. We've now not got Boris because the parliamentary party are too worried about what the media are saying. People are too worried about what the opposition are saying, rather than doing the right thing. When we think it would go back to David Cameron, at least David Cameron used to say, it's not about doing popular things, it's about doing the right things. And some things are unpopular. But if you need to do it for the good of the country, it needs to be done. And it's about making them unpopular decisions, but calling the right ones. And I just think the party's lost its way. It's too interested in what the media is saying and what the opposition is saying, rather than being Conservatives.
It is, the whole process is deeply unedifying, I think, for the Conservative Party, as you say. And how do you think, Stephen, after all of this, come back in September, how do they move forward? Does it therefore need to be a candidate, somebody like Kemi Badenoch or Penny Mordaunt, perhaps, who have a bit of clear water between them and the Johnson regime, who came under such ethical scrutiny during COVID and all the Partygate and all the stuff that we're sick of talking about? Do they need a clean slate? Nobody that was part of that particular movement,
No,
if you
I
like.
don't think so. You could have, I mean, you've got backers from the Johnson era anyway, backing every member, everyone that's coming through here. I mean, you've even got Esther McVeigh backing Jeremy Hunt. I think the weather's got to her there, really, but never mind. We're in a difficult situation. We've got on the 5th of September, we'll know who the leader of the party is going to be, the new Prime Minister. A month after that, we've got the Conservative Party conference to be held in Birmingham. That's the point where the party will come together at the Conservative Party conference. We'll have a new cabinet, all new ideas will come out, and the party will go in a new direction. If they can take the country with them, that's another matter.
Yeah. Stephen, brilliantly put. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Now, Stephen Carlton-Woods there, hopefully feeling a little less exasperated as he sounded at the start of that interview. We're all getting a bit like that, aren't we? But it is exciting. It's one of the biggest political events of our lifetimes. Now, after the break, we're going to be discussing those Dutch farmers. You might think this has got nothing to do with you. Believe me, it does have. They're protesting against new net zero legislation. It's affecting their agriculture sector. And one of our viewers wrote in to request that we talk about that. But first of all, the wonderful, sunny, don't be frightened of it, weather.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Plenty of sunshine around for the next couple of days. Not as hot as the last few days, but we could see temperatures rising further as we head into the weekend. High pressure has been dominating, one area pushing away, but another one moving back in. But it's moving back in behind this cold front that's been drifting south, and that will introduce slightly cooler conditions for most of us today. It's a little fresher out there this morning, still very warm and humid in the south. But further north, we've got a fairly brisk wind continuing to bring some showers over the Highlands and the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. Maybe one or two showers getting into southwest Scotland during the day too. But for most places, dry and fine after the early cloud tending to break up across the south. Here, still pretty warm, 27, 28 Celsius, but not the 30 or more we've seen over recent days. And further north, generally fresher, more comfortable conditions, less humid, temperatures in the high teens, low 20s. Through this evening, we'll see a bit more cloud spilling into northwest England and Northern Ireland, with maybe 1 or 2 showers here. We'll keep some showers in the far north of Scotland as well, but further south it does stay dry. It'll be a cooler night again. Still temperatures staying in the teens, but lower than the night just gone. Into Thursday, and it's a fine summer's day across southern England, South Wales, plenty of sunshine. Further north, a bit more cloud to come tomorrow over particularly northwest England, western Scotland and Northern Ireland, where there will be some outbreaks of rain at times. Much of eastern Scotland and to the east of the Pennines staying dry and bright. Plenty of sunshine, as I say, in the south, and we've lost the heat, so temperatures, although potentially getting into the high 20s across the southeast, mostly high teens, low 20s. So close to average for the time of year, and it will feel that much fresher than the past few days. However, the heat is expected to build again through this weekend. The Met Office do have an extreme heat warning in place covering both Sunday and Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. This is To The Point with me, Bev Turner, on GB News, live on your TV, online and radio. This morning we might have Penny Mordaunt down on College Green having a little chat to us this morning. If we do, we will come straight to that to hear what she's got to say. But first of all, Alan got in touch with the show. Thank you, Alan. To say, will you cover the Dutch farmers' uprising? It's a very interesting story developing there. And you're not kidding, Alan. It is a very interesting story. Dutch farmers are protesting after the introduction of new laws designed to cut nitrogen and ammonia emissions by up to 95% in certain areas from its agricultural sector. Now, European farmers are being faced with rising fertiliser costs due to the war in Ukraine and demands to cut down on emissions from the net zero obsessed lot. So in Britain, unions have urged Downing Street to give them more time to overhaul their businesses to make them more sustainable. Here to discuss this further and why it's relevant to us is the Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford. Hello, Andrew. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Can you just explain to our viewers put a bit more meat on the bones of what I just gave you there as to why these protests are taking place at all in Holland and also in Germany now?
So the Dutch farmers have been told by their government that they have to reduce the use of synthetic fertilizers by 50%. Now, obviously, this is going to have a huge impact on their yields and therefore their profitability. And essentially what they're saying is that huge numbers of farmers will be driven out of business. I think there is an underlying story that the government would really quite like to get their hands on the land be used for other things, notably housing. So this is actually quite a common theme across a lot of countries. It's not just the Dutch, because there is an EU directive in place that will require farmers in other countries to reduce their nitrate, their fertilizer use. It does actually, because we were in the EU, that directive is still part of UK law. So it looks as though that will hit UK farmers by 2025. It also applies in places like Canada. The Canadian government are going to force their farmers to reduce fertilizer use. This obviously is quite frightening. It could potentially severely undermine food security. Net zero has already severely undermined energy security.
We can go back to Tom.
We could be facing blackouts this winter, but food security as well, that is going to have very, very serious impacts.
So, Andrew, we've got, as you say, this is happening in Canada. We've got, in America, farmers in all sorts of trouble with Bill Gates buying up a lot of farmland, not really offering any explanation as to why he's doing that. We've got the situation in Germany, the situation in Holland. What significance do you think all of these global events are going to have for us here, for British farmers? How bad is it going to get here for our guys?
My hope would be that the uprising in the Netherlands and Germany will concentrate minds here in the UK. We're heading for a very, very difficult winter. I think by the time we get a new prime minister and we hit that crisis immediately they take office, I think there will be a huge public demand to reassess what we're going to do about global warming and our whole approach to it. So I would hope whoever gets in power will take the opportunity to change course, and that those potential new rules about fertilizer use here will be done away with. I should say as well that there are other threats to food security coming out of the net zero agenda in the UK as well. We're paying farmers essentially to take their land out of production and to turn it back into forest or whatever, the rewilding agenda. There was a very, very significant budget taking hundreds of thousands of acres of land out of agricultural production. Fortunately, that budget's now being reduced, so I hope that's on the back burner now, but it could, they're pushing for it to come back again. We're also pushing hundreds of thousands of acres out of agricultural production by turning it into solar farms. So again, this is a very serious threat, I think, to our food security.
Andrew, it's Andrew Montford there from Net Zero. It is one of those situations. It feels like it may not be relevant to us here, but it really is. We've got to keep an eye on what's happening with our food security and our farmers. Right, you have been getting in touch. Ted in Wales talking about the leadership race. I cannot believe these candidates are the best that we have. Someone once said, every country gets the government it deserves. This appears to be true at the moment, and I shudder. All the leaders are in hiding and all the stupid wannabes are shouting, look at me, I'm your next target for the night of the long knives. You have to be very careful for what you wish for. Roger has said, we need new blood, not the people who got us into this mess. Kemi for me. I think there's a lot of truth to be said for that, Roger, particularly in who might get a vote next time round. Christine in Oxfordshire, thank you, Christine, says Penny Mordaunt is by far the best candidate, completely level-headed and competent. Good luck, Penny. We're hoping to bring you her statement, actually, in just a moment, so stick around for that. And Mike has said, listening to some of the MPs supporting Sunak, they're clearly out of touch again with the public. Time for someone fresh. Kemi would be a great start. A lot of you offering your support to Kemi Badenoch. And, of course, remember, she's the lady that we have to thank for single-sex toilets. So I will be forever grateful to her for that. Now, coming up, 1 in 5 people are using the wrong inhaler, increasing the risk of serious illness. We're going to be talking about that after the break with the GP. But before that, a look at this morning's news.
It's 10:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. 8 Conservative candidates face the first round of MPs' votes today to determine who will continue in the battle to become Prime Minister. It's Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Tom Tugendhat, Kemi Badenoch, Penny Mordaunt, Jeremy Hunt, Nadhim Zahawi and Suella Braverman on the ballot. The remaining candidates have to hit a threshold of 30 votes today to stay in the race. Well, the results will be announced at 5 o'clock. The UK economy grew by 0.5% in May, following a 0.2% drop in April. Analysts had expected the figure to remain flat. The ONS says the growth came after a bounce back across all services, manufacturing and construction, with a particular increase in demand for health services and holidays. The president of Sri Lanka has temporarily authorised the country's prime minister to carry out presidential duties. It's amid ongoing protests in the country caused by anger over inflation and widespread fuel and medicine shortages. Now, as we've been talking about the Conservative leadership contest, let's hear now from Penny Mordaunt.
Well, good morning, everyone. Lovely and warm. I am so proud to be standing here today to introduce Penny. She and I have known each other for well over 12 years. We campaigned passionately together for Brexit, and we served together in Theresa May's cabinet. And I know Penny to be an incredibly hard-working, totally capable and utterly... utterly honourable friend and colleague. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the Right Honourable Penny Mordaunt MP, our next Prime Minister.
Thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone who is getting behind my campaign. Now, in the last few days, I have been undertaking the parliamentary equivalent of speed dating. I've had a lot of good conversations with a lot of wonderful colleagues, and I've learned a few things. I've learned that many of them were councillors before they came into Parliament. Many of them work for voluntary organisations. Many of them have run businesses, and some still do. Many of them are still pulling a shift in our NHS. And many of them serve in our armed forces and are veterans. They're people that want to serve their country. They're people that want to step up and take responsibility. And when I meet people like that, I want to know why. Why do they do that? Why do they want to take responsibility? Was it some experience in their life? Was it an inspirational person that they met? And when did it happen? And for me, it was when I was 9 years old and I was standing on the hot walls in Portsmouth watching the Falklands Task Force leave Portsmouth Harbour. Now, I didn't know much about that scene at 9 years old, but witnessing it and Thatcher's resolve at the time, well, I knew my country stood up to bullies. And I knew that that was important enough for some of those warships and my classmates' fathers not to return home. I'd seen duty and service and sacrifice for something greater than ourselves. And it's the reason why today, when people ask me about Britain and our role in the world, I say we don't need a new role in the world. We just need to be ourselves. We feel these values keenly. It's why we serve as parliamentarians. They're the values of our party. and they're the values of our country too. Our greatest moments have been when we have been the living embodiment of those values, and our greatest failures were when we came adrift from them. Recently, I think our party has lost its sense of self. If I can compare it to being in the Glastonbury audience when Paul McCartney was playing his set, we indulged all those new tunes, but what we really wanted was the good old stuff that we all knew the words to. Low tax, small state, personal responsibility. We need to get back to that because we've got some really serious challenges ahead. We've got to stave off a recession. We've got to deliver on the huge ambition that the British people have, having left the European Union. We've got to catch up after COVID. We have a war, and we have a manifesto to deliver, and standards and trust to restore. And the British people are fed up. They're fed up with us not delivering. They're fed up with unfulfilled promises. And they're fed up with divisive politics. So how do we turn this around? Well, first of all, we have to admit that Whitehall is broken. There are great people that work there. But in my administration, you will see it look and feel very different, very fast. We need to do some serious machinery of government changes. We're going to have a tighter cabinet. We're going to have ministers of state that have clear and timely deliverables and are powerful and can reach across Whitehall. And we're going to modernise government with the white heat of modernisation. We need to move at the speed that business and science needs us to. Secondly, we need to build a modern economy. Now, you'll have heard pitches this week on tax and spend. I'm going to talk about growth and competition. My key fiscal rule is that debt as a percentage of GDP will fall over time. My monetary policy will be on controlling inflation, and our supply-side reforms will yield a Brexit dividend on investment, infrastructure, incentives and innovation. And we also need to let our citizens live well. From me, you're going to get a relentless focus on cost of living issues. I've already announced that on day one we are going to slash VAT on fuel at the pump by half, and we are going to raise income tax thresholds for basic and middle income earners in line with inflation. But we also need to extract more value. For example, through simplifying and reducing the cost of being tax compliant for our citizens and for business. And we need to get things to work better. I'm going to be putting power back into the hands of parents. We are going to create personal budgets to allow every child access to their entitlements to subsidised childcare at any time prior to them starting full-time school. And we are going to create some task forces to get a grip on the crisis and paralysis in accessing NHS services and dentists, and also, and vitally, stagnation in house building. Fourthly, if we are really serious about levelling up. We cannot be limited in our ambition by what is in the Treasury's coffers. We have to get real about this. So I want to align government planning cycles with those of business and the charity sector, which are already aligned. And that will give us huge opportunities to co-fund, to form partnerships, to do more for our citizens. And we need some national missions in this country that the whole country and every sector can get behind. And I also want to set up some social capital pots that MPs themselves can administer. You guys are best placed in your communities to spot those gaps and spot the opportunities, and I want to give you more agency to serve your communities. And finally, I want all of our citizens to be able to live in safety and security. I'm committing to our manifesto commitment on defence spending and our NATO spending pledge. But I am also going to remove some of the strains on our armed forces and take tasks from them that they don't need to do. And so I'm going to stand up a civil defence force, as I outlined when I rewrote this country's resilience strategy. And I want us to consolidate and capitalise on the huge amount of civic action there was during the pandemic, all those volunteers that came forward to make our country the most resilient nation on earth. My country and our party has been through a lot in the last few years, but we have stamina. Make no mistake about that. In that moment of crisis during the pandemic, the British public stepped forward. They were moved by the values of this country too. They are capable and responsible people. They expect their government to be too. They expect us to deliver on both the mandate and the majority they handed us. I can, and we will.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Penny. Now, unusually, Penny is determined to answer a number of questions. So, ladies and gentlemen of the press, hold on to your hats. But I'm first of all going to take a question from the gentleman here. Thank you.
You made a very attractive childcare policy announcement. Could you be more specific about what it means for parents?
It's the same amount of money, but we're going to stop telling parents how they have to spend it. What it will mean is it will be completely flexible. It will be able to be used to be tailored to what that family needs. And we don't have to spend more money to deliver some of these services better. We just have to do them in a smarter way.
Beth Rigby, Sky.
Thank you. Penny Mordaunt, you're the big unknown in this contest. You were never a Johnson supporter. You were never part of his reshuffled cabinet team running the country over the past couple of years. The public have no idea who you are, and neither do lots of us either. What one diarist described you as, Theresa May with bigger hair. Are you? And if you win this election, will you, like May, call another general election to get your mandate rather than riding on the coattails of Boris Johnson?
I was a candidate at the last general election. I stood on the same platform as these good people in front of me. And I think what the public want us to do is deliver on that now. like to know you all better, and I hope I will get the opportunity to.
That's the Trade Minister, Penny Mordaunt, making her bid to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, launching her campaign, supported there by Andrea Leadsom, who, of course, has lots of experience of specifically this process. You are now up to date. I'll be back at 11 o'clock to give you a more overview of what's happening in the day's news. We are on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Shortly, back to Bev.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.190 to the dollar and 1.185 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,452.77 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Hello, this is Bev Turner on GB News. It's 10:48. This is To The Point with me. We are live all morning. Now, I do want to reflect a little bit on that Penny Mordaunt statement with Tom Harwood, who is here with me. But we've just got to do one quick story because we've got a couple of GPs and I've been trailing this story, and you know it's your show, so you asked for us to talk about this, but I promise you we will reflect on what Penny Mordaunt just said. Around 1 million people with asthma are relying on reliever inhalers to manage their condition, but Asthma and Lung UK have said that 1 in 5 people are using the wrong inhaler and increasing their risk of illness. So joining me now to discuss this further is GP Dr. Mike Smith. Hello, Mike, and thank you ever so much for hanging on. It's obviously a bit of a rolling news show today with everything that's going on. First of all, why are so many patients, and many of them will be watching this, using the wrong sort of inhalers for asthma?
It's not so much they're using the wrong inhaler. I think that they're using the wrong inhaler at the wrong time is what we're supposed to mean. But broadly speaking, there's 2 types of inhaler with people with asthma. There's the ones that prevent asthma getting worse or asthma attacks, for want of a better word. And there's those that relieve the symptoms of asthma and the symptoms of an asthma attack. And what we're finding is about 1 in 5 people in a recent report from Asthma UK are relying on the reliever inhaler, the typically blue inhaler, rather than using their preventers to stop getting sick in the first place. Now, once again, I think that that's because it provides immediate relief to their symptoms. And the problem with the preventer is you don't see the effects immediately. You see it sort of a day or 2 or 3 days afterwards. And also it's getting the habit of doing it twice in the morning and twice in the evening. So I do understand why it happens. But actually, the other thing, or the other part of this is that the national guidelines for prescribing for asthma mean that we don't automatically prescribe a preventer. Now, a lot of GPs do because they know that's better. But actually what we probably need is a change in the national guidelines overall.
And what else can people be doing, Dr. Smith, to help their asthma condition? Because it sounds like if people aren't taking enough medication, maybe they're reluctant to take so much medication on a daily basis. So what else can people do if they're struggling?
Well, I think that's a really good question, Bev, and please call me Mike. Dr. Smith sounds so formal. I look behind me when someone calls me Dr. Smith. I'm not that generation that insists on being called doctor.
We've only just met. We've only just met, Mike. Don't worry. It's Mike from now on.
No, I know, absolutely. So what can people do? I think that it's paying attention to their symptoms. I think it's, a lot of people, they don't notice over a long period of time their symptoms getting worse. The fact that they're using more and more of their blue inhaler on a weekly basis, particularly when pollen counts are up, particularly when there's infections in the air, etc. So some people don't realise that actually the amount of blue inhaler that they're using is going up, and if they're finding themselves requesting more of it, then a lot of the time that is a sign that actually you probably need a bit of a tweak in your asthma care. And remember, there's not just one preventer, there's lots of different preventers. So sometimes it requires stepping up and going a little bit further. The one, hands up, there is a problem with people having regular asthma reviews. And the last 3 years, that's been quite bad in terms of, A, we've not been able to get people in to do their face-to-face reviews, and we've got a massive backlog. I know we as GPs could probably be better at doing asthma reviews more face-to-face. And the final part of that is probably everyone needs an asthma plan. Everyone probably needs to have a written plan or at least a texted plan from their asthma nurse in the practice about what to do when certain things happen. So I'd say that they were the main things that people could do, asthma sufferers.
Mike, is asthma one of those conditions which you can't really do much about? Like, I think of it as maybe a comparison with other lifestyle conditions like diabetes. So with asthma, does it help to get fit, to lose weight, to improve your lung health anyway, maybe with supplements or stuff? I don't know. Or is it just one of those things that you're born with and therefore there's not a lot you can do?
I think it's both, actually. I think, look, people with asthma, there's no cure for asthma. You know, and actually it's learning to live with your asthma. But you're quite right, you know, being fit, losing weight, doing all the sensible things in life, not smoking, doing a lot of the boring things in life is probably going to help you in the long run, absolutely. But unfortunately, there is no cure. And you're quite right, like most of chronic diseases, it's making sure that it doesn't interfere with your life, that you find a way of managing it with your everyday lifestyle. And the other thing about asthma is that, you know, you'd be surprised in this day and age that people still die of asthma. You know, there's still a lot of deaths in A&E, particularly of younger people, because of asthma attacks. And if you listen to the story of why that happens, it's people gradually getting worse and then tipping over the edge because they didn't they didn't access healthcare quick enough, or nobody picked up on it quick enough. So, you know, this is something we can do a lot about.
Thank you ever so much for that, Dr. Smith there, who I call Mike. I hope that was useful. I know at this time of the year, particularly with all the pollen in the air, it does, and the heat, if you've got asthma, I know this is the kind of day that can exacerbate it, so I hope that was useful. Right, Harwood, you're still here? You're not fallen asleep at my desk?
Not quite yet.
Right, we were watching that Penny Mordaunt statement with interest. First of all, choice of room, very interesting. Why there?
Very interesting. It's at the Cinnamon Club in London, which is a bit of a posh curry house. It's actually the same place where Sajid Javid launched his campaign, although it looks like a different room and perhaps a slightly smarter background. You had all sorts of charts, maps. It was a very naval sort of venue.
Farrow and Ball colour she chose there. I thought, you've not picked this room by accident. She looked the part.
She absolutely looked the part, although according to people in the room, it was swelteringly hot. Quite a small room, lots of people getting in. Makes the whole thing seem very busy, but quite uncomfortable, although she didn't succumb to the Sajid Javid trap of sweltering there at the lectern. Another impressive point from her there, no notes. It reminded me, to some extent, of David Cameron's famous speech in 2005, the one that sent him into the lead in the Tory leadership contest in that year. He delivered an impressive speech that was well received with no notes.
Yeah, I mean, I think she had some little notes on the desk in front of her, maybe as just a little crib sheet
sort of reminders,
suggestions. But as you say, there's no auto cue. She was just winging it. What did you think about what she chose to focus on thematically?
It's really trying to present her as a person, talking about growing up in Portsmouth, talking about remembering at the age of, I think, was it 8 or 9?
She said she decided to go into politics at the age of 9, and I thought, oh, come on, Penny, no 9-year-old decides to go into politics.
And it does sound unbelievable until you heard the second half of that story about her friend's parents going off to war. Of course, Portsmouth,
to the Falklands.
To the Falklands, where Portsmouth, where a lot of those ships that flotilla left from in 1982.
Well done. I was 9 years old. You were just a twinkle in your parents' eye then.
Certainly was. But no, it's that whole idea that she is offering a different sort of perspective and sort of appearing there as almost this captain of the ship. And she's spoken before in this leadership contest about leadership and using that word very deliberately, saying it needs to be less about the leader and more about the ship, more about the team that she will build. But there was some other policy in there too, some pots of money for MPs to spend in their own constituencies. No doubt Tory MPs will like that. She mentioned the need to get inflation down. That's very, very important. And she also mentioned that she would halve VAT on fuel. Now, that is a very important thing and something that we're only allowed to do because we left the EU. So
very
hints to her Brexiteering campaigning there as well.
That would be, I think, very popular with people, wouldn't it, at the moment? She didn't mention any of the identity politics, which she's become quite tarred by because, of course, she stood up in the House of Commons. I think it was a little while ago now when she said a trans man can be a man, a trans woman can be a woman. And this has haunted her in this day and age, that they see her as too woke.
It has, and she's tried to address this in recent days. Actually, we cut away from it before all of the questions were done, but I've been following some of those questions just in the last few minutes, and one of them did raise that question, and
Right.
she has a new line this morning.
Go on, what's her new line?
Which is
Tom?
quoting Margaret Thatcher on this issue.
Margaret Thatcher cannot have had an opinion on trans rights.
No, she did not, but she had a very funny quote about Willie Whitelaw, who was one of her big supporters in Cabinet.
Right.
Margaret Thatcher said every Prime Minister needs a Willie. And referring there to Willie Whitelaw, her strong ally there. And Penny Mordaunt this morning said, well, Margaret Thatcher said that every Prime Minister needs a Willie, but this kind of woman, or that I as a woman don't have a Willie, or something like... Do you know what? I can find the exact quote for you, Bev, because I think this is probably important, because I absolutely mangled what is quite a funny soundbite.
Well, I think it's brilliant that you were even looking at that when we'd already left that, Tom, so that you know exactly what she said, and it is important.
Here we go. Margaret Thatcher said every PM needs a Willie. Well, a woman like me doesn't have one. So that's more of a definitive answer on that question.
OK, so a woman like me doesn't have one, but there could be women who do have a Willie, is what she's saying.
I'm not
It's a very clever way of getting around it.
Perhaps it's a way of getting around it, but also what she has been saying is that she doesn't think... I think she's made a distinction about 2 or 3 days ago in a Twitter thread between women and biological women. Perhaps that might be...
I mean, let's be honest, that... I know it seems important, but that shouldn't scupper her chances of being leader of this country if she is good enough to do the job, in my opinion. And I have to say, I thought that was really impressive. And now, keep all your thoughts coming to us on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after this quick break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner, on your TV, radio and online. I'm with you until midday. It is one of the most exciting political days of the year today. All of the candidates are throwing us their pitches to be the leader of this country. We've also got your views and opinions coming in as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and I'll be getting to those throughout the show. But first of all, the very important news with Rosie.
Well, a very good morning. It's just 1 minute past 11. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Conservative leadership candidates have been vying for support from their fellow MPs ahead of the first ballot later today. The Trade Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, has just launched her campaign this morning, saying she would return to traditional Conservative values and fix what she called a broken Whitehall machine. Tom Tugendhat, meanwhile, has pledged to increase defence spending. 8 Conservative candidates are still in the running to be leader of the party and therefore the next Prime Minister. 3 candidates, including the former Health Secretary Sajid Javid, stepped out of the race last night after failing to secure enough support. The remaining candidates have to hit a threshold of 30 votes today to stay in the race. The results will be announced at 5 p.m. Well, this morning, the former Brexit Secretary David Davis, who's supporting Penny Mordaunt, told us her plan for the economy is strong.
This is a thoughtful approach which will actually work. And that's the key point. Will it work? If we are running an economic policy that's working at the next general election, we'll win. If we're running one which is made up of populist nonsense, we'll lose.
The UK economy grew by 0.5% in May, following a 0.2% drop in April. Analysts had expected the figure to remain flat. Well, the ONS says the growth came after a bounce back across all services, manufacturing and construction, with a notable increase in demand for health services and holidays. Well, economics commentator Laurie Laird told GB News a recession isn't likely.
So there was one anomaly, which is our going to the GP more often, that kept us in the black this month around. But because May was so strong, it looks like we will probably not contract in the second quarter. So it means that this talk of recession is still some way off.
The president of Sri Lanka has temporarily authorised the country's prime minister to carry out presidential duties. Well, it's amid ongoing protests in the country caused by anger over inflation and widespread fuel and medicine shortages. The premier's fled to the Maldives hours before he was due to resign. He's insisted he still intends to step down. A state of emergency has been declared and a curfew's been imposed in the aftermath of the escape. Twitter is suing Elon Musk for breaking a £37 billion deal to buy the social media platform. Twitter's asking a US court to order the Tesla owner to complete the merger at the agreed share price. Last week, Elon Musk said he was terminating the deal because Twitter had failed to provide information regarding how many fake accounts were on the platform. New CCTV footage has been released showing the events of the shooting that took place in an elementary school in Texas in May. The video shows the police stopping to use hand sanitizer as 18-year-old gunman Salvador Ramos entered the school in Uvalde carrying a rifle. 19 children and 2 teachers were killed in the latest in a string of mass shootings across the US. 4 men have been arrested in a National Crime Agency operation targeting migrant smuggling to the UK. A man was arrested in Dagenham on suspicion of facilitation offences, as well as 3 further men in Ilford, Streatham and Leytonstone. The arrests are linked to 2 separate events in 2019, where a total of 32 migrants were found in the back of HGVs in the Netherlands and France. An amber warning for extreme heat has been issued for this Sunday and next Monday. The Met Office are warning of potential exceptionally high temperatures that could impact both infrastructure and travel. Well, they say it's likely there'll be adverse health effects leading to potentially serious illness or danger to life, and say those warnings are not limited to those most vulnerable to extreme heat. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to...
Thank you, Rosie, and a very good morning to you listening on your radio or watching on your TV. I am Bev Turner. We've got a great show lined up for you for this final hour. Here's what's on the menu, decided by you, our GB viewers, as it's Wednesday. As Prime Ministerial hopefuls fall over themselves to win back some trust and confidence from voters, good luck with that, I'll be looking into just how many illegal migrants have crossed into the UK while our government wasn't looking, with the help of Alp Mehmet of Migration Watch in just a moment. Meanwhile, many of you are concerned about whether Tory leader candidates' proposed tax cuts will affect our defence spending. Interesting. Will such cuts put the UK at risk from foreign aggression? I'm going to be speaking to a defence expert later in the hour. And finally, we've received many emails from parents outraged, I tell you, at the state of personal and social education in schools. I think I'm probably one of them. So we're going to be talking to a former teacher and now Conservative MP, the fantastic Miriam Kate. I love her. She's going to be joining us to discuss that a little bit later. I've got all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. You can get in touch with your views, as usual, on gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, as you know, it is Wednesday, so we cover the stories and the topics that matter to you. Who else does that? Nobody. So we had emails wanting us to address the one story that never seems to go away. It keeps a lot of you awake at night. The continued illegal crossings of thousands of migrants across the Channel into the United Kingdom. We got this email from GB News viewer David Crook. So David asked, could you please keep us informed of the number of illegal asylum seekers still coming into the country down on the south coast? It seems to have gone off your radar over the last few months. So let's have a look now at the numbers. It's not necessarily that it's gone off our radar. The big Rwanda story was a huge deal, wasn't it, at the time when that was announced? And so I suppose whilst that's getting unravelled, we've gone a bit quiet on it. But the number of people crossing the English Channel in small boats so far this year has exceeded 14,000. 259 were pulled off 6 boats in the Channel yesterday by vessels from Border Force, the Royal Navy and the RNLI. So here to discuss these figures with me is Alp Mehmet, Chairman of Migration Watch UK. Hello, Alp. Thank you very much for joining us. 14,000. Is that more than an average year?
Actually, this month it's fallen slightly, but that's still huge. It's 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 more almost than it was in the whole of 2020. That is extraordinary. We're talking about serious numbers. By the end of the year, if it continues at this rate, I reckon we're going to get between 30 and 50,000. That's a huge number. And that's those we know about. There are so many coming across that we don't know about. For example, in 2021, we estimated that there were probably 9,000 more in addition to those who came openly in boats coming across the Channel. So there's a lot going on that we don't actually see.
Do you think the reason we've had this spike recently is because of the warning that illegal immigrants would be transferred to Rwanda for processing? And so maybe the thinking is we've got to get there before that starts?
I personally, I don't think that's likely, to be honest. People who want to come over here don't care whether there's a few of them going to be sent to Rwanda, whether they are actually ever going to be returned. Clearly they're not. Most of them, having got here, will get here to stay. That's all they're concerned about, and that's what the traffickers play on.
So you mean the Rwanda deal, as we keep calling it, would not be a deterrent, in your opinion, from anybody?
I have always said, and I've said many times on GB News, that in itself is not going to be the magic wand. It's not going to solve the problem of illegal immigration across the Channel. But if enforced, and that's what we haven't seen yet, it will help, along with other measures.
But in Australia, they did something similar, didn't they, where they said to people, if you come here, we will ship you to, my memory's letting me down, where did they say?
Nauru, for example, or indeed ship them back to Indonesia where they came from.
And it cut the illegal immigration down to pretty much zero, didn't it?
It pretty much. We haven't done anything like that. We've said we're going to ship you off to Rwanda in a third country, which we think is pretty safe.
Yeah.
Give them money to set up if they're accepted for asylum there. And we've done nothing. Absolutely nothing has happened. And that's the message that's going over. Actually, they don't mean it. They don't mean it. They don't really care. And it seems that the government is really playing to the gallery. Headlines, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. In the end, very little happens. And that's what really drives a lot of people to continue to want to come here.
So Patrick Christie did a nice little piece on when he was sitting in for Nigel Farage last night, where he went down to a hotel, I think it was in Kent, where some of these migrants are housed. Is that what's happening to these huge numbers? Tell us what happens, Alp, when they get off the boats on the beach. Where do they go? How are they kept safe? How are we kept safe from strangers being here undocumented?
Well, that's an extremely good question, because at the moment it doesn't look as if they're actually being held anywhere securely. They're distributed around the country, having been initially, there's a sift, if you like. and they look to see who's desperately ill, who children, women. Generally, they're sort of set aside. Those who are clearly able-bodied young men coming from a safe country, they are considered whether or not, and they do all apply for asylum, by the way.
Yeah.
They're considered whether, in fact, they qualify for asylum. While they're waiting for that, they're distributed around the country in hotels. Local authorities, there are a number of local authorities who have agreed to take in asylum seekers like this. But they're go into hotels and then they have the freedom to really mill around in our midst.
See, you can see why our viewers I can see why people get so incensed about this. Because it just feels like we have entirely porous borders. Come along, you don't need to have any papers to get here, and off you go, and you can live anonymously.
No, that's absolutely right, and you hit on an important point. Almost all of them have no passports when they arrive. Just about everyone, no doubt because they're being advised to do it by the traffickers, destroy their identity documents. So we don't even know who we are actually letting in. And it's, as we heard yesterday from Mo Farah.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about that.
It's all too easy to get documents that say you are something that you're not, or indeed not have any documents and claim to be someone that you're not.
Isn't that Mo Farah's story, though, also maybe a little bit of a wake-up call for some people who presume that everybody who arrives here as an illegal immigrant has malicious intent? I think we have to address that's not the case, is it? You can go on to become a Knight of the Realm and win Olympic gold medals for us. So we do have to not be quite so hysterical about this.
Well, of course, but then, Mo Farah is someone special. He came here as a child. There's no question that he's an illegal immigrant. Of course he's not.
He certainly wasn't an economic migrant,
However,
was he, at 9 years old?
Exactly. The fact is that there are hundreds of thousands of people coming to this country as economic migrants, including those who come across the channel claiming to be fleeing persecution, when they're clearly not, especially if they're coming from France, for goodness sake.
Now, I bet you've been watching this Conservative leadership race pretty carefully. What have the candidates had to say about immigration, and who have you liked? Who's said anything that you quite like the sound of, Alp, in this regard?
Well, you've asked two separate questions there. One, the answer to the first one is very little, if anything, has been said about immigration.
And because of that, you can't answer the second one.
And that's what I'm waiting to hear. Frank, it's all very well to say, we're going to pull out of the ECHR or we're going to tackle illegal immigration. The fact is, as we heard only a couple of weeks ago, there were 1 million long-term visa grants given to people, issued to people in 2021. Immigration at the moment is going on at a rate of knots. That's why we find all around the country that there's so much pressure on housing, there is so much pressure on our health service. All these things. No one thinks about the fact that when you have 3.5 million people added to your population in the space of 10 years, just 10 years, that's significant. And of those 3.5 million, something like 80%, in fact, considerably more than 80%, probably, were the results of immigration. Due to immigration, immigrants coming here and their children born here.
So tell me this then, Alp, because at the moment you can't go into a business that has enough people to work in it. Coffee shops, retail, go to the local garage. There's not enough people to work anywhere. Don't we need more people to do those jobs?
No, we don't. We do not. There are plenty of young people prepared to do these jobs. Just pay them a little bit more and treat them better, and they will do those jobs. But when you say, yes, OK, everyone come in to do whatever unskilled job there is going, what about the housing? What about the roof over their heads that they need? What about all the other things that living in a country requires people to have?
We're running out of time. I could talk to you all day. Can I just get a very quick answer from you on this story that broke, I think it was week before last, maybe last week, about the people traffickers that were caught living in the UK? Why haven't we been able to do that sooner?
Why, indeed. I mean, the resources actually devoted to enforcement have plummeted. And because of all sorts of reasons, not least of it, the Windrush debacle, because of all that, there's this fear that somehow you can't go in and arrest people, you can't look for people. It's absurd, really. If you're going to have an immigration system, if you're going to have a law, you've got to enforce it as well, and you've got to devote the right resources to doing it.
OK, fantastic. Thank you so much. Alt Mehmet there from Migration Watch. OK, we are moving on. Quick break time. Will tax cuts reduce our defence spending, and would that leave us at risk? I'm going to be answering that question and more after the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry for many of us today, although not for everyone. There will be some warm sunshine across much of the country. There'll also be some showers for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Low pressure is way to the north of the UK, but it's still close enough to produce a few showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland. For England and Wales, a ridge of high pressure continues to dominate, and it's a fine day. But there has been some early cloud for southern parts of England and South Wales, and that's slowly peeling away during the afternoon. Sunnier skies follow, but there'll also be some sunny spells for Scotland and Northern Ireland, albeit with 1 or 2 showers. The most frequent of these will be in the far north, where it will be cool with a keen breeze. I think high teens, low 20s for northern parts of the UK, mid to high 20s further south, and then a warm night to come for many of us, with the cloud disappearing in the south, but with plenty of clear spells for many. There'll be a few more showers coming into northern and western Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland overnight. 12 Celsius in Glasgow and Belfast, 15 for London, so a relatively mild, or in some places warm night to come. And then another fine start to the day tomorrow, with plenty of sunshine for England and Wales. I think 1 or 2 showers could just about move into parts of England, especially over the Pennines, and they'll be more widespread for Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. In between, still some sunshine, high teens, I think, widely in the northern half of the UK. Sunshine remains in the south with 25 to 28 Celsius. Into Thursday evening, the showers in the north eventually die away, and then widely clearing skies. And really the trend into the weekend is for high pressure to develop widely across the UK. That will lead to widespread sunshine and dry weather, and it will turn increasingly hot, temperatures approaching the mid-30s later.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So Howie in for Real Britain, Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Hello, it's 11:23. You are watching GB News or listening on your radio to The Point with me, Bev Turner. Now, many of you have been asking to cover stories that you want covered. It's Wednesday, that's what we do. And many of the Prime Ministerial hopefuls have pledged to cut taxes if voted into high office by Conservative Party members. But with a war happening in Eastern Europe, some of you are concerned that tax cutting could put our defence budget at risk. Here's an email that we got from George from Tain in the Highlands, who says, he served in the Royal Navy for 30 years. We need more boots on the ground and a larger Navy. It is the most important factor in protecting our trade and our citizens' lives. I would increase the defence budget and raise taxes to achieve this. Similarly, Peter Maskell in Grimsby says, my son is serving and the size of our conventional forces have long concerned me. The size of the British Army is about the same as an Old Trafford football crowd. So would tax cuts make our armed forces smaller and put our country at risk? It's a very valid question. Here to discuss more is Robert Clark, the Director of the Defence and Security Unit at Civitas, at the Institute for the Study of Civil Society. Good morning. Thank you ever so much for joining us, Robert. So in answer to our viewers' questions, if we cut the budget for defence, does that put us at risk?
Good morning. No, not necessarily. So just to take stock of where we are in this conversation, 4 of the 8 hopeful leadership candidates have explicitly stated that they will raise defence spending. Now, on the one hand, that's obviously important and it's significant to note given the current security situation in Europe and further afield. However, what will be interesting is to note how they actually plan on doing so. You mentioned, obviously, with lowering taxes as well. But what's interesting and more important is actually these increases to defence spending will take place over this decade. So we're not talking about an immediate uplift over the next year or even this government session. So we're talking about a small to medium term increase in defence, which, like I mentioned, is actually incredibly relevant and timely.
Isn't the biggest threat to us now, though, Robert, not somebody trying to drop bombs on Great Britain, but it's a cyber threat? We had a week ago, we had an unprecedented joint statement by the MI5 and the FBI in the UK. It got very little coverage here in the UK, very little in the mainstream media. But for me, that was an incredibly significant moment because they said our biggest threat is China, and it is what they would do from a cyber security point of view. So maybe we don't need so many tanks and bombs anymore.
You raise a really interesting point. So in terms of the Western security and intelligence agencies' conclusions on China, for instance, and the threat that cyber poses, cyber wouldn't be utilised as a standalone operation. For example, it would be part of a much broader military campaign against the West or against Western allies, more likely, for instance, Taiwan, and as we're seeing now in Ukraine. So there does need to be an increase in cyber. However, this was announced only 2 years ago with around 400 to 500 million pounds over the next 4 to 5 years increase in cyber. That's an enormous raise. So now really we need to look further afield. And like I say, it's how defence spending will be managed and increased over the next sort of 7 to 8 years. This is where the conversation's turning, and I believe it's turning for the better of defence. And it really should come down to reversing the government's recent decision to cut troops, the British Army numbers to around 10,000, and the reduction from an entire warfighting division of armour to only 2 regiments. These remarks have been echoed by senior, recently retired commanders in the British military, and it's something that myself and other defence experts have been long advocating for.
Let me ask you, Robert, while I've got you, because it does feel very relevant. We've sent, you'll know the figure better than me, how many millions have we given to Zelensky in Ukraine to fight that war over there, first of all? Do you know the figure?
It'll be around, yes, it's around 3.2 to 3.5 billion pounds, either so far given since February and promised until the end of this year. That includes obviously the anti-tank armaments that we've seen, weapons, and also increasing the training that we're giving the Ukrainian armed forces happening here in the UK. The detail of which I can't really talk much about for obvious security reasons, but that all costs a lot of money.
And look, we all know that what's happened to innocent civilians in Ukraine is horrific, horrific. But I'm not sure how big the British appetite is to keep pouring money into the defence security situation over there. Is there a limit, do you think, at which point the people of this nation will say, we can't support this anymore from a financial point of view, it's just not sustainable?
To be blunt, no, I don't think there will be a limit in the public's appetite. There will, however, be a limit in the government's spending and coffers, which will limit the amount. I mean, this 3.2 to 3.5 billion that I mentioned a moment ago, that was obviously unplanned for. So that's had to be withdrawn from the defence budget over the successive years. I don't think there'll be a reduction in the public's appetite for the assistance to Ukraine. We can see daily the horrific and barbarous acts committed by the Russian regime and the Russian military in Ukraine. We're taking Ukrainian refugees by record numbers, and we're assisting the assistance forces in Ukraine. So I don't think the public appetite will wane. It'll just come down to a more practical reality with the government budget.
OK. Robert, thank you very much. Robert Clark there, the Director of the Defence and Security Unit at Civitas. Hopefully that was reassuring to our viewers who got in touch to say that you were worried about that. You've got all your views here. A lot of you have been commenting on the Conservative race for leadership. Dan has said it has to be Liz Truss for me. I can't wait to see the look on Hunt and Sunak faces when they're told they're not wanted. A lot of you showing support for Penny Mordaunt after we brought her statement to you a little bit earlier. Jackie says, what a speech. I didn't know much about her before, but she stands head and shoulders above the others. She should be our next leader. She made Keir Starmer look really ordinary. What a woman. Johnny says, oh, come on, if Penny Mordaunt isn't our next Prime Minister, this country has truly lost the plot. Lots of you showing your support for Penny Mordaunt after she did that statement just a little earlier, which we brought you live. Now, after the break, I will be talking to Tory MP Miriam Cates about the so-called experts coming into our schools and teaching our children about the birds and the bees, personal relationships and sex. Before that, a look at this morning's news.
A very good morning. It's 11:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Conservative leadership candidates have been vying for support from fellow MPs ahead of the first ballot later today. The Trade Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, launched her campaign this morning, saying she would return to traditional Conservative values and fix what she called a broken Whitehall machine. Tom Tugendhat's pledged to increase defence spending. There are 8 Conservative candidates still in the running to be leader of the party. Those remaining have to hit a threshold of 30 votes today to stay in the race. The results will be announced at 5 p.m. The UK economy grew by 0.5% in May, following a 0.2% drop in April, according to official figures. Analysts had expected the figure to remain flat. The ONS says the growth came after a bounce back across all services, manufacturing and construction, with a particular increase in demand for health services and holidays. The President of Sri Lanka has temporarily authorised the country's Prime Minister to carry out presidential duties. It's amid ongoing protests in the country caused by anger over inflation and widespread fuel and medicine shortages. The Premier fled to the Maldives hours before he was due to resign. He's insisted he still intends to step down. A state of emergency has been declared and a curfew imposed. Twitter is suing Elon Musk for breaking a £37 billion deal to buy the social media platform. Twitter's asking a US court to order the Tesla owner to complete the merger at the agreed share price. Last week, Musk said he was terminating the deal because Twitter failed to provide information regarding how many fake accounts were on the platform. An amber warning for extreme heat's been issued for this Sunday and next Monday. The Met Office are warning of the potential of exceptionally high temperatures that could impact infrastructure, travel and cause adverse health impacts on the general population. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.190 to the dollar. The pound is 1.184 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,452.91 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. You are watching Bev Turner on GB News. Oh, you're listening to me on your radio in your car. You might just be sat there with the air conditioning on. We're going to bring you a story at the end of the show about basically how hot it's going to be. It's much more interesting than that made it sound. Now, we're moving on now to talk to Conservative MP Miriam Cates. Now, this is because one of you got in touch to say, a few of you actually got in touch to say, can you let us know what's going on with sex education in our schools? Mercy and I were chatting about this on Monday. Calvin Robinson was with us and he had quite a hard line about the fact that it should be parents' jobs to tell our children all about sex and relationships. But of course, it doesn't always work that way. And if any of you have got kids, you'll know they just don't want to talk to us. They don't want to listen to what we've got to say. So GB News viewer Bren Lewis, a retired primary school teacher, wrote in and said, can you please continue to examine how young children are being robbed of their childhood in this new personal and social education curriculum? It's not even confined to PSE either. It isn't, actually, Bren, you're right. This was a story that was doing the rounds on Twitter yesterday. I kind of can't get my head around this. It's a drag queen called Miss Tess Tickle in a primary school. If you are listening on the radio, I'm going to show you the picture. There's a drag queen, Miss Tess Tickle. Can't imagine what they're getting at with that name. And this, I guess, I don't know if this person is transgender, but whether they are just a man in drag, right? I know it's complicated times. You've got to pick your words carefully. But the photograph is of them at a primary school with every child in a Pride logo, apron. You've got Pride colours, and we approached this person for comment, We haven't had a response back at the moment. But the question is, is that appropriate? She says in her tweet or on her Instagram page, occasionally I go into school and educate them. Now, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to give that primary school the benefit of the doubt and presume that they weren't there to talk about the kind of content that Miss Tess Tickle might talk about in her usual adult comedy show, which is what she would normally do. But I'm not sure there's a place for that in school at all. I think I'd be a bit unhappy if it was my 11-year-old in that class. Now, former teacher and now Conservative MP, the fantastic Miriam Cates, is joining us. Miriam, thank you. You were going to come to the studio. We've had a few issues in terms of getting you here, but I think you're joining me down from College Green this morning. There you are. Nice to see you. Where do you feel that we're at in this country in terms of sex education in our schools? Have we become very, very liberal? And if so, why?
Well, I think we're in a crisis, and I think one of your viewers that wrote in that you just said now explained this as robbing children of their childhood, and I think that explains it very well. I think we're forcing what are very adult concerns onto children from a very young age in a way that's irresponsible, it's inappropriate, it's sexualising children, it's putting them at risk of grooming. And I think we need to take a long, hard look at ourselves and ask why are we doing this? Why are we exposing children to sexual material, to sexual ideas, well before they're ready? And why are we hiding some of these things from parents? I think there's some big questions to ask. And at the moment, I think more and more of these materials are coming out every day, and that's good. I'm glad that the press has kept on pushing into this. I know my colleagues in Parliament are also looking into it. But we've got a long way to go.
You've got children, I think, Miriam, have you? Correct me if I'm wrong. Haven't you got 3 like I have?
Yes, I've got 3 school-age children, and I used to be a teacher myself, used to be a biology teacher, so I have delivered sex education. But I think what some of us, my age, our age, think about of sex education, the facts, the birds and the bees, an explanation of puberty, the law, consent, those kind of things. It's very important to teach those things in school, and parents rightly expect that to be done well. But I think some of these other materials and some of quite extreme ideologies that certainly don't have consensus in our population have made their way into sex and relationships education, and now are becoming mainstream in schools, even though they're certainly not mainstream in the general public. And this is where the concern lies, because of course parents want those facts taught correctly, but they absolutely don't want their children sexualised and indoctrinated. And since we had this debate in Parliament 2 weeks ago, my inbox has been overwhelmed with more and more emails from parents, distraught actually at what their children are being taught, the effect it's having on them, and also their inability to exercise their rights as parents to withdraw their children from these lessons, or to at least see what they're going to be taught.
It's so interesting, isn't it, Miriam? Because it feels like this has happened, this pendulum has swung so quickly from a time when I remember working, I did some work with the FPA, the Family Planning Association, about 20 years. And at the time, that charity was working very hard to get age appropriate, to get more sex education into schools. And it was never about broadening a child's mind to understand what it is to be a drag queen. It was about enabling a young person to have a language to describe their experience, so that if somebody was doing something to them that was not right, they had the words to go to an adult to explain, my private space is, I am being made uncomfortable by somebody coming into my private space, whatever that looked like. That level of education is okay, isn't it, Miriam? And how do we stop that tipping over to the more pernicious kind of stuff that we're seeing now?
Yes, you're absolutely right, and that's what I mean about how it's important to teach children about the facts, about the law, to protect them, to make them ready for adult life in an appropriate way. So the question is, how has that kind of factual and acceptable education become this extreme agenda? And I think this is where we need to ask the questions about who does it benefit for children to be sexualised? Who does it benefit for them to start looking at extreme sex acts in their early teens? And that's why we need to expose some of the things that are going on with these sex education providers. So the RSE curriculum, the relationship and sex education curriculum that was introduced 2 years ago, was a good idea, to make sure that all children are being taught the facts and the law. But the guidance is so flimsy, it's not statutory, and it's opened up the floodgates to all these sex education providers who have dubious agendas, in my view, who put these materials out there, who sell them and give them to schools. Schools are too busy, they don't have enough RSE specialists to go into this in detail. They take the materials, they take the visitors, and they've made their way into what was was perhaps a much more, fact-based curriculum. And I think it is part of a wider trend to adultify children. If we go back to extreme climate activism and then critical race theory and now gender ideology, these are adult concerns. Of course, adults should be talking about them and taking a view, but they're not concerns for children. We should not be making children pawns in an adult political agenda. And I think that's what's going on here. That's why we need to bring it into the light. And that's why, quite frankly, the government needs to review the whole curriculum, to put in place some much stricter guidance about what is age appropriate, what is factual, what is acceptable, and put power back in the hands of parents.
And I would say put power back in the hands of head teachers who can say no. So, for instance, some of these outside organisations, drag queen story time, or some of these sort of trends, and some of these organisations, actually, these non-governmental organisations that come in and will, how does it work, Miriam? They phone a school, they'll phone the head and they'll say, it's Pride Week, we're going to send in one of our guys, girls, something in between, and they're going to come in and they're going to chat to the children, and we're going to broaden your mind, and therefore you as a headmaster is going to be doing a brilliant job because you're supporting the Pride community. Is that what's happening? And then the heads go, well, I haven't really got any guidance. It probably sounds like the right thing to do. This is the kind of stuff that I'm reading about in the media. In you come. Is that how it's happening?
Yes, I think that's probably about correct. I mean, heads are in a very difficult position. There is guidance. They are supposed to check in detail who's behind the organisations that come into school, what their social media platforms say. They should be picking up on some of the more egregious examples that you've mentioned, but head teachers are extremely busy. They're also part of the same political culture that we are very well aware of. This is a very toxic debate. And you can understand a head teacher who might be nervous about the idea of bringing some of these people into school, but on the other hand, doesn't want to be called intolerant. I mean, look at the problems that Maya Forstater has faced just in being honest about her views about biological sex. You can see that a head teacher who doesn't feel they're backed up by the government, doesn't feel they're backed up by the local authority, is coming under extreme pressure in this area. And that's why, yes, head teachers do need to be strong, but so does the government and so does the guidance to give head teachers the backing to make the right call.
Interesting. I can't have you here, Miriam, today as a Conservative MP, as a young female Conservative MP. I'm not sure how that's relevant, but we've got a lot of support for the women candidates coming into GB News this morning. We saw Penny Mordaunt do her speech, which went down incredibly well. You're backing Suella Braverman, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. I'm backing Suella. I think she'd be a brilliant Prime Minister. And we've got to remember, we're not electing a leader of the opposition. We're not just electing a leader of the party. This person has to become Prime Minister straight away. They have to know what's going on at the moment, how to deliver our manifesto commitments. And we've come up to some really sticky issues, haven't we, on the Northern Ireland Protocol, on illegal immigration, on this sex education in schools. It's going to take someone with a firm grasp of detail and someone who's willing to stand up against media outrage, against this kind of radical progressive agenda from the left. And I think Suella is that woman.
And you must be looking, Miriam, at some of the blokes on this list, some of the absolute key protagonists in the chaos of the last couple of years. And I know that you were one of the very few MPs that was brave enough to stick your neck out and talk about the justification for vaccinating children against COVID, for some of the lockdown measures and the effects they had on children and teenagers. You must be hoping that none of those guys get the job, right? You need some clear blue water between the idiots that have taken us through the last 2 years and perhaps a new brush.
Well, I have been very critical of the lockdown policy and some of the COVID policies and the decision to vaccinate children. I think we've revealed over the last 2 years how little we value children in this country, and that needs to change rapidly. But I wouldn't be so quick to pour judgment on some of the candidates. I think, they were part of a very difficult time in government. They faced extreme pressure, not just from within government, but from the media, from the opposition, from the general public as well.
Yeah.
And you can't take people out of that context. And, you know, I think most of these people in that moment thought they were doing the right thing and doing their duty. So I think we need to be careful of tarring everybody with the same brush. But on the families and children issue, I do want to see whoever win to put children first.
All right, Miriam, thank you. Ever so nice to see you. Miriam Cates MP there. We have run out of time. Don't go anywhere. Up next is The Briefing with Gloria, and I will be back with Mercy tomorrow. See you then.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry for many of us today, although not for everyone. There will be some warm sunshine across much of the country, but there'll also be some showers for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Low pressure is way to the north of the UK, but it's still close enough to produce a few showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland. For England and Wales, A ridge of high pressure continues to dominate and it's a fine day, but there has been some early cloud for southern parts of England and South Wales, and that's slowly peeling away during the afternoon. Sunnier skies follow, but there'll also be some sunny spells for Scotland and Northern Ireland, albeit with 1 or 2 showers. The most frequent of these will be in the far north, where it will be cool with a keen breeze. I think high teens, low 20s for northern parts of the UK, mid to high 20s further south, and then a warm night to come for many of us, with the cloud disappearing in the south, but with plenty of clear spells for many. There'll be a few more showers coming into northern and western Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland overnight. 12 Celsius in Glasgow and Belfast, 15 for London, so a relatively mild, or in some places warm night to come. And then another fine start to the day tomorrow with plenty of sunshine for England and Wales. I think 1 or 2 showers could just about move into parts of England, especially over the Pennines, and they'll be more widespread for Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. In between, still some sunshine, high teens, I think, widely in the northern half of the UK. Sunshine remains in the south with 25 to 28 Celsius. Into Thursday evening, the showers in the north eventually die away, and then widely clearing skies. And really the trend into the weekend is for high pressure to develop widely across the UK. That will lead to widespread sunshine and dry weather, and it will turn increasingly hot, temperatures approaching the mid-30s later.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.